Welcome back to The Big Question. We'll keep looking at your comments on 22422 on Twitter using the hashtag The Big Question. Gentlemen, thank you so much for making time for The Big Question tonight.
Thank you.
I will start by looking at the results yesterday. Let's start with Malindi constituency. The number of registered voters here is 55,856. ODM's William Tengo won with 15,582 votes. Philip Charo of Jubilee Alliance Party, 9,243. Right, in 2013, the results were as follows. Dan Kazungu of ODM, who is now the Cabinet Secretary of Mining, won with 16,679. Lucas Baya, URP, 6,052. Fuad Mohammed Waipa, 3,461. Edward Karani, TNA, 2,661. The voter turnout difference yesterday, the by-election, 48%, about 48%, and in 2013 election, 64.8%. Of course, the variables are different. In Kericho County, registered voters, 290,458. Aaron Cheriot of Jubilee Alliance Party won by 109,358 votes. Paul Sang of Kanu, 56,307 votes. In 2013, Charles Keter, the current Cabinet Secretary of Energy, won with 201,363. Paul Sang of Kanu again came second then, but with 36,831. There was Stella Chepkirui of ODM then with 17,381. Again, the voter turnout yesterday was not like in 2013. In the by-election, the voter turnout was 57.69%. In 2013 election, 89%. First, gentlemen, let me just get from you your initial assessment of the results of this by-election. I'll start with you, Javas.
Well, there is nothing that has been really remarkably different in these by-elections, the two by-elections, Malindi and Kericho. But what can be underscored is that both leading coalitions made or left intractable impression in their regions where they have got major following. For example, if you look at Kericho, basically it retained the much support that it has for the Jubilee coalition, as was the case in Malindi. However, we know that there are a couple of variables that came into play that I'm sure we are going to reflect on.
Very briefly.
Well, I think a voter turnout of 48% is very impressive by all standards in a by-election. I would think if you were to collate statistics on by-elections, 48% probably would be on the higher side of the by-elections we have had so far. I think Homa Bay, which had a very huge turnout, was somewhere in 47%, and even constituency by-elections were much lower than what we have seen. So I think that the Malindi turnout was very high, and that must be associated with the issues that were involved in the campaigns and the vigor with which the voters wanted to impress some of the ideals that they were chasing. And I also think even in Kericho, the kind of turnout that we saw was very high. You can compare that with Homa Bay, for example. In 2013, in Kericho, about 200 or so people, 200,000 people voted for a candidate, for example. This time 100,000 people are voting for a candidate. In Homa Bay, for example, 128,000 people voted for the winning candidate. So I think as we are going to the elections, we are seeing voters more active, and we are seeing them impressing themselves, asserting themselves more actively.
Okay, very good.
No, I think the general agreement for all of us, and I agree with what my colleagues have said, is that there's no big difference between 2013 and now in terms of what the political parties got in Malindi and in Kericho, the margins, the percentage of turnout. If you look at Kericho, for example, we have 89% in 2013, we have now 57%. Malindi actually has a greater improvement, because in 2013 it was 64%, far much lower than Kericho, which was 89, but then went close to being 48. So if you see the improvement of Malindi, it looks like the contest in Malindi actually attracted more. There was greater stakes in terms of trying to get both sides of the political divide. So I have seen some ignorant people making analysis out there about, somebody made a statement in Malindi, or I made a statement in Kericho. despite the fact that I come from a political party, I don't think we made any big improvement in Malindi, neither did we lose anything in Kericho. So the difference is really small in both cases. Okay. It remains almost the same.
I'll come to that and we'll look at the numbers very briefly, but let me ask this question to you. What happened in Malindi yesterday? He talks about it was a high-stake by-election in Malindi. The intensity was a bit different. We saw a lot of accusations of, you know, some even MPs were accused of perpetuating fraud. Do you think, at the end of the day, the will of the people was reflected in the by-election?
Well, in the end, we know that votes were cast and those votes were counted. Hence, the winners and the losers that were announced. However, it is inconceivable that we have got members of the National Assembly who were alleged to have engaged in some election malpractices, and that was aimed at influencing the possible turnout or outcome of the by-elections. And I think that brings into focus the necessity of stakeholders and as a nation looking at the place of the election laws, for example, the Elections Act, all these violations that emerged, and also the place of IEBC. For example, if you look at how the chairman of the IEBC responded to some of these allegations that the police are investigating and having learned of all these things from the media, it is improper for the chairman of the IEBC, and also appreciating the place of such an independent commission in respect to Chapter 15 of the Constitution. We need to see the IEBC having in place functional election guidelines that moving forward into 2017, such kind of things should not actually emerge.
Okay, I want to go to Malindi, and if we can get the 2013 results there. We know yesterday, if we can get the figures there, we know yesterday William Tengo won by about 50,000 votes. In 2013, Dan Kazungu of ODM then won with 16,000 votes. Now, given again in 2013, Lucas Baya URP, Fuad Mohamed Waipa, Edward Karani, if all their votes were to be added, it will be about 12,000 votes. Yesterday, Philip Charo got 9,000 votes. So would you say the status quo was maintained in Malindi? It was just the same thing?
Well, first of all, you need to know that there is a change every time there is an election. You can see that the traditional voting pattern of Malindi, those who are inherently on one side of the divide against the other, has been very constant in all those comparisons you make. But you need to know that JAP is a new kid in the block as far as Malindi is concerned. The other time we had URP, we had Wiper, and we had TNA. Those were different dynamics altogether. Now that we have JAP, you may be thinking perhaps it is a collision of all the forces, perhaps, which were on left side of the divide against perhaps the traditional ODM voters, which was on the right-hand side of the divide. So I am seeing a situation in which, and you remember that Philip Charo has always been ODM, really. Yes, he's been an ODM guy until he was poached and asked to join JAP. So his traditional supporters are still ODM. In fact, if you were in the polling station, they are asking you to nataka chungwa ya Charo. You see, so he is more visible, he is more identifiable, but with ODM. So this is how these things play. So
okay.
I think I can agree. I mean, as I said earlier, we can agree, because if you add Lucas Baya and Edward Karani TNA that time, it comes to about 9,000 votes. One would have expected, though, that if we move to 9,000 from 6,000, I mean 9,000, and the other party, the ODM coalition, the CORD coalition had 19,000, if you added all of them, that they would have been a bit higher. So if you look at the difference, we made small gain. The only problem is that you can't really make that projection that as a result of that small gain in a candidate, in a constituency elections, you can't really project that either we have increased in terms of our support for presidential candidate or we have reduced it. You can't use. Do you think? My argument is that you can't use a constituency elections to project that therefore one has made or lost gains in terms of the presidential elections. What do
you very briefly, TJ? Do you think the results were? Did they mean anything to ODM? I mean, was the status quo maintained, or did you?
Well, if you are asking about the figures are there, and they will for a long time be very constant. But if you are asking in terms of so did visibility, did the presence or personality of the party come out more strongly in these elections because of the numbers which we are seeing.
Yeah.
I'll tell you something that you see when you have elections towards a by-election towards an election.
Yeah.
Because you see, it is getting into the election fever. You have what you have as a referendum. In other words, the decision that you get most likely at the time that elections are nigh will probably be the same things that you will have come the elections. So what you are seeing here is a people who have resisted the forays of the others who would have wished to pick those votes from them. And they have resisted consistently. In fact, put a marginal increase even in a by-election. So if you are asking me in terms of ODM, yes, ODM has shown that it is bold. It has also shown that the voters are identifying very closely with the ideals that they pursue in that constituency.
Okay, let me just ask this.
If that argument is going to, let me just add something to what Honorable Kajwang has said. If that argument is going to be sustained, it means therefore that for us in Jubilee we should be celebrating that we've met some ground. And remember, we already had 50+1. If you are going to make this argument that everybody has kept constant across the country their votes as they had in 2013, it means therefore in Malindi we've made a small gain which adds to our 50+1, making it better. If that's the argument.
That is not. You see, when you compare a general election to a by-election, the first thing you need to know is that it's not like comparing. It's like apples and oranges. So the voter turnout must always be marginal. It must always be marginal.
Okay.
General election must, as this was 64 and 48, and so the little gain you get, or the little whatever it is that you lose, do not add to the figures, except that they show how persistent and how resilient the voters are to the ideas they're pursuing.
Right. Let me bring Javas into this, and I want to look at Fuad Mohammed in 2013. Wiper candidate got 3,461 votes. If you can look at that. His votes then, maybe many would have thought they would have translated into code votes yesterday and added into onto code votes, but we didn't see that happen. So from what they are saying, do you think Jubilee gained any ground in Malindi?
Well, some slight gain, because whatever Jubilee gained or came to their side was not initially there. There are some factors that come into play when you want to look at the voting behavior. Some affective factors and or affective influence and cognitive influence. And here also remember that you have to tether your thinking still to the sophistication of the leading or the leaders of the respective coalitions. Because when supporters of these candidates were going to these rallies and even going to the ballot, while they were looking at these candidates, they were also having at the back of their minds the leaders of these coalitions, for example, the Jubilee coalition and the Code coalition. All these factors came into play. And that's why you could see that there was some sustained effort by the leaders of these coalitions to make sure that their candidates win. Now, when you look at, for example, the votes of the initial former, the Wiper candidate in the past election, it would have been expected, for example, that all these, voters would have effectively been transferred to the candidates this time around in this by-election. But some of these individuals, for example, it does not necessarily mean that if the Wiper, the Wiper supporters necessarily believe in the code issue, much as they belong to the same coalition.
Okay, let's talk about Amason Jeffakingi and Hassan Joho vis-a-vis the code rebels like Gideon Mungaro and the rest. Now that you're saying it could be constant or Jubilee could have gained some ground, you say ODM and code is still very strong in the coast. To who does this look bad?
Well, this about ODM is on the table. You can see that there has been whatever it is that Mungaru has been doing, with whatever it is he has been campaigning for, and all these moles and rebels that have been talking around, you can see that they have not shaken the component of the voter bloc in Malindi. And so I attach very little to what the Mungarus of the days have been doing, except, of course, good riddance, and I think Wananchi have found them good riddance.
Do you?
No, I really don't think, I don't think that is the reasoning. And as I said earlier, You can have even a situation where ODM can win the votes in Malindi, but the governor goes to another party. It has happened in many constituencies in Coast and many parts of the country. I, for once, have seen the popularity of most of those MPs in place, and you can't really rule them out completely that come 2017, I mean, they will not be re-elected. That argument does not suffice. But also, if you look at the margin, the slight margin we've increased, it could be because of them. And maybe we costed, it is possible that part of our problems costed the candidate, and that we added a little bit to the candidate and the candidate was weak. So it depends. I mean, you can't make that conclusive argument that then Mungaro is not popular.
Mungaro was on TV and described himself as king of Malindi. He said that, as a matter of fact, he is the one who sliced a bit of his constituency for Dan Kazungu. In fact, he said that is the one who made sure Kazungu became an MP. The fact that Mungaro has not been able to make any serious gain means that he's just a punctured buffalo. The guy is just done, if I talk politically. He's just done because you cannot see anything that, any foray that he may have made on ODM and this slicing of his constituency to influence anything that is of significance.
Let's move to Kericho very fast. Again, Aaron Cheriot, you'll talk about that. Aaron Cheriot winning with 109,000 votes, 358. Paul Sang of Kanu, 56,307. The difference there, first I want Kipchumba Murkomen to talk about the difference. Would you think there was much ado about nothing on all the campaigns in Kericho?
You know, most people, because they don't have the history. In 2013, Charles Keter beat Paul Sang by 170-something thousand votes. So actually, Aaron Cheriot has not done as much as Charles did to Paul Sang. And if you add the votes of Paul Sang and ODM, who supported Kanu in these by-elections, you will get it 53,000. So if there is any significant addition to those,
that is in 2013.
In 2013, yeah. It just makes, if you add it for 2013 to be 53, if you add with now, it's 56. If you see the percentage, you have Charles Keter having slightly, over 70%. Aaron has done 65% despite being the first-time candidate. So the point we're trying to make here is that there is nothing Jubilee has lost in Kericho. There is nothing significant to say anybody has gained there. There is no argument. There's been, but there was
we didn't have ODM this time.
That's what I'm saying. The ODM voters voted for Paul Sang. And I can tell you that for sure. No, I can tell that for sure. If you add the ODM votes and you add with the one for Paul Sang, it comes to
and I wish we had those graphics on air. But then, Stella Chepkurui of ODM had 17,000. Yeah. Paul Sang of Kanu had 36,000. You're saying if we add those two, it'll amount to 53,000.
Yeah.
Yesterday, Paul Sang managed 56,000 on his own.
That's what I'm saying.
ODM,
that's what I'm saying. The ODM candidate is not there. There were only two candidates, Paul Sang and Aaron. The other ones got 400 votes and so forth. They were in significant parties. We know the supporters of ODM, and they have a consistent support of about 15,000 votes. Even tomorrow, if they bring a candidate, they will still get those votes. And the point I'm trying to make here is that, we want to make, there has been a fallacious argument out there that Kanu is making an entry into
before you say that, there's a difference in voter turnout. I'll bring you into this.
Yes.
There's a difference, obviously. The variables are different. The voter turnout in 2016 and 2013. But just look at 2013. Charles Keter won with 201,000 votes.
Yes.
Paul Sang had 36,000.
Yes.
The difference this time, I mean, with the difference of the voter turnout, is 109,056. Would one be reading too much to say Kanu is also gaining some?
That's what I want to come to that. There is nothing Kanu is gaining or in any part of Rift Valley, and that argument is fallacious. So in the sense that in the same year, when Charles Keter had slightly over 70% of the votes, the president and the deputy had 91%. And I want to give a comparative analysis. When you go to Bomet, Nick Salat, who was a senator, had 98,000. Lesan, who is now the senator, had 115,000. But the president and the deputy, who are in TNA URP, had 95% of Bomet. If you go to West Pokot, the governor and the senator came from Kanu, but Jubilee had, Uhuru Ruto had over 90%. So you cannot actually make that argument that Kanu was making again to where.
Okay, let's get
you know, you cannot.
I'm finding it very difficult when we talk about parties because the statistics do not really help us to describe parties as it does describe the agility of the people and the passion with which they went to pursue issues. Because in Kericho, for example, this thing called JAP has never been there. It is, this is the first time it was there. And last time we were talking about URP. So you can't see those URP voters inside that JAP you're talking about, unless you want to see things through your own spectacles. ODM is not there. You can't see ODM inside the Kanu vote. ODM could have voted anyway. So when I hear my brother talking about seeing ODM inside, I do not know how he's looking at it.
Unless we just become academic.
Well, it's not academic.
If we are political,
I would rather say that I can see a big number of people coming out for elections, and the ones who are seemingly, or the ones who lost, for example, the ones who are in Kanu. I saw Muloka saying that this should not be construed to mean that there are some other guys who are involved here. This is Kanu. It is not about party. It is about these people who are coming out to protest about this thing which was perceived to be a comfort zone, about this thing which was perceived to be in, we are voters in one sack being led into a direction. I think that is what I am seeing here. I'm not seeing those parties the way my brother is.
These assumptions. One, did ODM field a candidate in Kericho? No. And fact is that because of that, there were these hanging ODM or potential or possible ODM supporters who were unclaimed. And because they were unclaimed, they could have gone either way, to vote either for Kanu or for Aaron Cheruiyot. And while it is clear that Kanu did not make really a significant impact or showing in this, but we can see that there is a scale-up in terms of the voters that went now to Sang as compared to 2013. Now, looking at this, of course, we know very well that Kanu has had his traditional home in the Rift Valley. And it will continue being there. It will always have its traditional supporters. Now, looking at, for example, 2017 to come, Kanu may still necessarily retain just those nearly the same figures or the same voters.
Now that give him time. I'll come. Just a minute. Now that you're talking about 2017, you think Gideon Moi, Kanu through Gideon Moi and other rebels, will have a say the direction Rift Valley politics will take? No. Or is Ruto still the man to beat in Rift Valley?
No, you see, the deputy president remains the indisputable kingpin and political supremo of the Rift Valley. And of course, the thing is, the argument even in this by-election has been, is Gideon Moi rising to challenge the leadership of the deputy president? If at all it would be possible that the answer to that question would be in the affirmative, then it would have been demonstrated in the outcome of the Kericho by-election.
And let me add something. Can you come
because you are on the other side of it?
Hussein,
are you able to respond to it?
One point. One point here. In 2013, Kanu gets that 6 votes. Kanu candidate, Senate candidate gets that 6,000 votes in Kericho. But even more important, the Belgut MP becomes a Kanu MP. But Gideon Moi never even managed to transfer even 1,000 votes to Musalia Mudavadi, who was his presidential candidate. People forget that in 2013, Gideon Moi never supported, or Kanu never supported URP, or TNA and URP or Jubilee. They are actually coalition members of ANC. Not ANC that time, UDF, which was Musalia Mudavadi. Not a single vote. Nick Salat gets 98,000 votes in Bomet. He never transferred even 500 votes to Musalia Mudavadi in the whole of Bomet. So this fallacious argument that was because candidate Paul Sang got, yesterday Paul Sang in his own constituency got 22,000 votes. You think those 22,000 votes will vote for Raila Odinga? Forget it.
No,
Don't even think about it. Don't think about it. I mean, the competition in 2017 is between CORD and Jubilee.
Let's
this is national TV. This is not politics. This is national TV. You see, the thing is, I would want to see. I would want to see the role of the people rather than talking about we politicians. We don't carry our voters in a sack and we walk around with. What I think has happened here, because URP, for example, if you were to go with that in that direction, URP did not fail the candidate. So are you going to say that the leaders of URP together with Murkomen and Ruto lost? It's not true. It cannot be true. That is why you can also not talk about Gideon, for example, because Gideon, for example, was campaigning with other people who are in other candidates. I would want to see I would want to see Wananchi, and where I see Wananchi is this, that there is a growing big number of people who are protesting against this presumed comfort zone. The kind of thing he's talking about, kingpins of regions, and they have shown very well. They have come out very boldly. In where I come from, they say that if you shout, the king may not hear, but the stones will have heard. This is what is happening.
Now they focus. But let me make this conclusion that it was not us in the Jubilee who made this referendum. First, that they were going to beat us. 2, that it was about William Ruto being strong or weak. 3, that it was about dividing and balkanizing Rift Valley. All that was sold by Kanu, but was proved wrong in these elections yesterday. So we are actually victorious because these people set the stage for us.
They have given their views. TJ Kajwang, MP Ruaraka, Senator Kipchumba Murkomen, Deputy Majority Leader in the Senate, and Javas Bigambo, sorry for that, is a political analyst. Thank you so much. So what do those results portend for you? Keep talking to us on 22422 or on Twitter using the hashtag. The Big Question will be back after this break.